So I am Radhika Mujumdar, Videsh Career Mentor, and today we will talk about a very important topic like how to make decisions for your grad school applications. So even if you are in the first, second, third, or the final year of your undergrad studies, this webinar will help you in how to think, how to make decisions before you apply, right? So we will be taking you through how to choose your country for your studies because yes, you will be spending a lot of time in this particular country, and then how you should opt for masters, PhD, integrated PhD even, then a little bit about the funding. So I will take you through the entire loan process and in general some information about how much you will need to shell out and how the loan process is exactly, right? And then the fall versus spring cohort. So whether you should apply for fall cohort, whether you should apply for spring cohort. And then I will also be taking you through the scholarships, right? So there are different scholarships available from your country of residence. So we will be talking about scholarships from India, and then also about the scholarships in Europe, US, and other countries. And then something about a recent news about the current funding situation, mostly in the United States, because things are constantly changing there. So let's get started. Also, I have a couple of things to say before we proceed. We have muted everybody in this chat. So, in case you have any questions, keep posting them in chat and we will respond to you as and when we can. And if at any point during the webinar you feel that you are missing out on the previous slide or the pace is too fast for you, don't worry, we will share a complete recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. Okay, so you can follow it up there at any time you want. And then let's get started. So if you are attending Videsh's webinar for the first time, let me tell you a bit something about Videsh. So Videsh was co-founded by three co-founders, Dr. Raj, Dr. Rajat, and Dr. Sridhar. So these are award-winning scientists and researchers from graduated from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and they have their respective PhDs from Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the Purdue University in the United States. So all three of them were in the US for 5 years before they realized that they wanted to come to India to pursue their dream of helping students and working professionals like yourselves to land your dream university. Okay, so at their point of application, when they were applying, they didn't have any professional mentorship, any professional mentor to guide them. The only help that they had was the internet and a few seniors. So with this aim, they founded Videsh, and now we are pursuing our dream of helping students like yourself land your dream universities. So a little bit about us. So yeah, this is our mission, and this is all about today's agenda. So let's get started. First, we will look at the country. So all about the country that you need to know. Okay, so we will talk about four options here. In general, USA, Europe, Canada, and Australia. Okay. So, how do you make your decision while choosing the country? So, what do you do? Which factors do you look at when you look at the country, right? So first is the courses offered. So make sure you know which courses you want to apply to when you are choosing the country, right? So if may it be a specific field or may it be a broad field of interest, know which country offers the maximum choices and the best choices for the courses that you want to pursue. Okay, because this is the most important thing when you will be visiting that particular university in that particular country, that you choose the correct course, right? It is very important. So make sure you do a good research about the courses offered in every country, right? And also make sure that the number of courses that are being offered are multiple. So just don't choose the country because there is one university that offers a particular course. Choose the country having a large number of options for yourself. Okay, so this makes your job much easier. This is about the courses. And then next is the MS PhD or the integrated PhD. Okay, so we will talk about what is the difference between whether you want to pursue your MS PhD or integrated PhD. A lot of students have questions about the difference between PhD and integrated PhD. So I will clarify that in my later slides. But then it is also very important to know which degree you want to pursue, right? Whether it is the MS or the PhD. And then a very important financial aspect of your graduation is the money part, is the tuition part. And by the tuition, I just don't mean the tuition fees that is mentioned on the website of every university. You also need to add up things like rent, living expenses, your health insurance, things like that when you plan to take admission into a particular university. Okay, so tuition fees is also a very important factor when you are choosing the country. Like for example, some countries are expensive, like USA is expensive, right? Comparative to China, comparative to Canada. So this is also you need to something that you need to take care of. Okay, and like I said, the cost of living. So in some countries the cost of living is much higher than the rest. Even like if you choose the UK, if you choose cities like London, Manchester, they are a bit expensive and costlier to live in than the rest of the country. So that is also an important decision that you need to make, like which university you're applying to and where is it located, right? And then the proximity from home country. So a lot of students we have observed get homesickness when they travel abroad for their graduate studies, and proximity from home is also an important factor you would want to consider. Okay, so keep this in mind when you're applying. And then scholarships, right? So funding is directly related to scholarships, right? If you get good scholarship, then your funding amount, your tuition fees is reduced, right? So I will also take you through some of the scholarships that you can apply to before going to MS or after going for your MS or PhD, right? So that is also an important factor when you choose the country. And then of course the job opportunities, right? Because all of us are studying to get a good job, right? So a job opportunity in a particular country should also be considered when you are choosing the country. So the particular country should have a good number of jobs available in the field of study that you're looking at. Okay, and then the visa restrictions. So how easy it is for you to get a permanent visa, to get a PR for immigration, to get a working visa in that particular country. You also have to look at this factor, right? And then long term settlement. So like I said, PR. So how difficult or how easy it is for you to get PR in that particular country. So these are few of the, I would say, 8 to 9 points that you have to consider when you are choosing a particular country. So now I am just going to offer you a quick, vis-a-vis comparison between the four countries at a glance, right? So, US, when you look at US, of course, according to the QS World Rankings, US has more top-rated schools in the entire world, right? So, the number of top-rated, top-tier universities, Ivy League schools are there in the US more than any other country, right? And if you look at UK, it has a very limited number of good universities like the Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial College. So hardly 3 or 4 UK universities make it to the top 100 of the QS University World Rankings. Okay, so that is the vis-a-vis difference. Relatively difficult to settle in USA, yes, because of the recent Trump administration. It is comparatively difficult to settle in the US for international students, and comparatively UK is stable, and they don't have any visa restrictions or any new stricter visa rules for the international students, so it's comparatively easier to settle there. Average tuition fee, now this is per year tuition fee average. Okay, so this is 45K to 50K US dollars, and this is the tuition fee for 1 year. Okay, and again, this is an average that we have taken. So top rated schools like MIT, Stanford, etc. will have tuition fees per year in the range of I would say 65 to 70K US dollars per year. And again, when I say tuition fees, you have to add up health insurance, your living cost, your rent, your utilities, everything. So you have to plan accordingly. And if you compare like UK, the average tuition fee is 30,000 pounds, right? And then the number of scholarships when you apply to the US universities is high. I mean, there are a lot of universities in the US also that are giving scholarships to international students, especially for PhDs. So that is something that is a positive side, I would say. And here in the UK, there is high inflation. So last year there was very, very high inflation in the UK, and that really plummeted the living costs. So countries like London, Manchester, like I said, are extremely expensive to live in. And yeah, like visa restrictions are more in the US as compared to the UK, so it is comparatively easier to settle in the UK. And then job market is large, so the kind of jobs that are created, the number of jobs created in the STEM fields or the engineering fields, it's is much larger in the US than the UK. So UK has comparatively lower number of jobs created per year. Okay. And then even when you look at the salaries, now I will give you just an overview of the salaries in my further slides. So the US salaries per year top any country salaries by a very, very respectable amount. And the kind of salary that you get in US is fairly very high than whatever salary you get in Europe or the UK. Okay, so now we move towards Canada and Australia. So Canada, as most of you might be knowing, it is immigrant friendly. They are inviting a lot of international students, international working professionals also in their country. It is very, very easy to get a PR there, right? Permanent residency is easy in Canada, and without any hassles, you get a very easy PR. Okay, so comparatively very easy to settle in this country. And then again, the tuition fees is also comparatively lower as compared to the UK and the and US. So 55 to 60,000 Canadian dollars is, I would say, an average good Canadian university average tuition fee per year. Yes, scholarships also are available when you are applying to Canadian universities, good universities. It is peaceful, quiet. There is not much happening there, and a lot of Indians now have migrated, or you can say a lot of international students have migrated to Canada. So everybody has their own community there. But then on the downside, I would say that Canada creates minimum wage jobs per year. Okay, so naturally the salaries are lower, and because these jobs are not very high tech and high end, this they end up paying a lower salary range than the UK or Europe, right? UK or US. So Canada is, again, if you are looking at the job market is large, but then they offer basic jobs, right? And again, like I said, some cities like Toronto, Vancouver, etc., have high cost of living also. So, and then again, you also have to consider in Canada that 6 to 8 months this country is covered in snow. So if you are like it sometimes get depressing for students. It's not very fresh, it's not very warm, so it can get depressing. You might feel homesick, so you might want to consider those factors also when you are choosing Canada. Again, now we look at Australia. So like the UK, Australia also has around 4 to 5 universities that are included in the top 100 QS university rankings, like the Australian National University, University of Sydney, Melbourne. One plus point, I would say, of choosing this country is that the work permits are very easy now, and they give like 3 years work permit for MS students and 4 years of work permit for PhD students. And last year, their government has also announced that they are going to extend this work permit by 2 years for MS and PhD. So, like, you would get an additional 2 years of work permit. So it's a win-win, I would say, for international students. And the country is, if you graduate from a good university, you will end up getting a good job also. So yes, high cost of living, again, that is there in every country. If you look at good cities, there is going to be high cost of living, and good number of jobs, I would say, parallel to the UK, right? So if you graduate from a good university, the chances of you getting a good job is high. But again, I would say that Australia is slightly racist when it comes to international students. This is from some of the students that have shared their experiences with us. slightly racist, I would say, not a violent kind of way, but then slightly there are, some comments, some racism here and there. So you might want to look at this factor when you are applying to Australia. Okay, so this is about the four countries in detail, and how you would want to choose the country is dependent on these factors broadly. Okay. And then, like I said, this is just a comparison of software engineering salaries in US dollars per year. So, like I said, US tops the rank by a fairly large number, and followed by Canada, Australia. Almost Australia and UK are in the same range, and then followed by Germany, France, Netherlands, etc. So, this is the software engineering salaries, just a comparison for you to know that when you are choosing a particular country, also look at the salaries that you will get after you graduate. Okay, now we will move towards another important and pivotal decision making point in your graduate applications, is the masters or PhD or integrated PhD. Okay, so I will take you through the difference between these three. So first is the masters. So masters is MS, and it is a 2 year credit course that you do. And throughout your masters, you will get a feeling that this is more like your undergrad college study, and it's more like coursework, credit courses, etc., and a lot less to do with research. So there is a particular number of coursework that you have to do when you are doing your masters. You also have to do a thesis at the end of your masters. So that is about it. And then sometimes it is also possible that masters can be converted to PhDs. So in case your research, in case you're doing any research, and if your professor is impressed with your research and they offer you a PhD in this particular field, that you then you might extend your masters and go for PhD. So you take your MS and then you do your PhD also in the same research lab. So that also happens a lot. And then the next option is the PhD. So this is the 4 to 6 year course. Okay, so this is a long term commitment, and a lot of PhD is related to research work. Okay, and most of the times your PhD is funded. It is either funded by a fellowship, or it is funded by a research assistantship. Okay, or a teaching assistantship. And then again, if you're applying for a PhD, you need to have a strong research background. Okay, so again, now what is integrated PhD? So integrated PhD is a combination of MS and PhD. So you apply for this program. A lot of programs have this integrated PhD as an option. So they give you MS plus PhD degrees at the end of your degree, at the end of your thesis. And again, integrated PhD can be cut short to an MS. So when you apply for an integrated PhD and you feel that this is not my cup of tea, or your patience starts to run out, then you can also convert this integrated PhD into a master's and graduate early. So that is an advantage of an integrated PhD. You can't do that in a regular PhD. Okay, so you can't cut short a regular PhD into an MS, but you can do that when you're doing an integrated PhD. Okay, so if you're unsure of what I am supposed to do, and if you don't have any research background, I would say go for masters. If you are sure, or maybe 70% sure that you want to do a PhD, you have a good research background, but you don't know if you last those 4 to 6 years, then I would say go for an integrated PhD. Okay, because the actual PhD is a long-term commitment, and there's no coming back from there. Okay, so this is the difference between the degrees that you apply to when you apply for your graduate studies, right? And then a little bit about the admission criteria. So whenever you're applying for PhD, it is more about the research fit. So your profile doesn't need to be stellar. You don't need to have exceptional GPA, or all of that. It is important that the research that you are doing aligns with one of the professor that they are doing their research in. So if it is a good research fit, the professor will ultimately offer you a fellowship or a research assistantship, and they will admit you. So a PhD admission is more about your research work, right? Because your resume, one page of your entire resume in your PhD application is about your research, right? So make sure that your research work is very, very strong when you're applying for PhD. And masters is again like getting into a good college, right? They look at your overall profile. If you have a stellar profile, it is comparatively easy to get into a good university. Again, I always say this, that if you have a research background when you're applying for masters, again, that creates a very, very good impression, right? And your chances of getting admitted increase. So again, even if you're applying for masters, it's good to have a research profile, because that gives you a competitive advantage over your peers. Okay. Again, for masters, it is important to have a coherent SOP, LOR, and resume, because your profile consists of the documentation part plus your research profile. So make sure that your profile stands out when you're applying for masters. Okay. Now we move towards another pivotal point in your grad school application, that is the funding. So by funding, I mean I'm just going to give you some information regarding the entire funding, how it works, how you're supposed to go about it. Okay. So the loan process, see, some of us have funds to fund our entire education, entire master's education, right? The rest of us take out educational loans. But then again, the visa process is a lot easier when you have a loan. Okay, because a loan means lesser number of documents when you go for your visa interview. So even if you have funds to support yourself, we would suggest you to take an educational loan, and that is how we suggest you to go about it. Okay. And the loan process should start after you get an I-20 form. Like I said, it is important to do the planning from now itself, but the actual loan process application should start once you receive your I-20. So this I-20 is an official admit to the university that you receive, and it is a very important document when you appear for your visa interview. Okay. So a general rule of thumb, that private universities are more costlier than public institutions. This is true in every country. So before you apply to every university, check if it is private or public, and that makes a huge difference in the funding. Okay. And then funding is, I like I said, broken into number of parts, like tuition fees, health insurance, rent, living expenses, groceries, utilities, etc. So make sure when you're planning your funding, make sure that you're including all these things in your planning, right? And then you would need some money for yourself also. So make sure you keep like $300 $400 for yourself every month when you're planning your funding. Okay. And then, like I said, it is possible to get an on-campus job when you are doing your MS or PhD. It's possible to get an RATA. And then, as a rule of thumb, it is important that you maintain a minimum of $10,000 in your bank account statement when you're applying for your student visa. Okay, it is important, it is imperative that you show roughly this kind of money when you're applying for your visa interview. Okay. Now, something about RATA and fellowship. So TA is the teaching assistantship. And in the TA, what you do is you basically grade different assignments under the professor. So the professor asks you to grade assignments, and there are also some lectures that you need to go to the university and take at the times and slots specified by the professor. So it is important that your schedule aligns with the TA. Generally, what we've observed is the TA aligns well with the MS program, and you can also combine it with the credit courses. So if you get a TA when you're pursuing your MS, it's well and good. It pays also, and it gives you extra credits also. What is a RA? RA is a research assistantship generally offered to PhD students when they are doing their research. It's mostly about doing research and being paid. Okay. And you can expect up to $1,500 to $2,000 stipend every month when you are pursuing your RA. Okay. And what is a fellowship? A fellowship is basically a scholarship that you get when you are pursuing a PhD from a particular university. So it also happens that all the people, most of the people who go for PhD are covered for a couple of years under fellowship, and then they have to switch to RA to fund them, right? So fellowship also is a complete scholarship that you do for doing research in the university and contributing to the research of the university. And then like I said, it's possible to get up to $2,500 stipend under fellowship. So every month it is possible to get up to $2.5K as a stipend, and it is possible up to 3 years to be covered in a fellowship when you're pursuing a PhD. So this is a difference between TA, RA, and fellowship. Okay, so now funding for your grad school, what options can you look at? So there are a lot of options like Prodigy Finance, HDFC Credila, Union Bank. Of course, none of these are sponsoring us. I'm just giving you an idea of, what you can look at when you're, looking at these particular options, right? So what the interest rate for educational loans can start from 11.5% and can vary up to 13.5%. So it is in between that somewhere. And when you look at the Prodigy Finance website, you will find this loan calculator there. So you can enter your loan amount here, and then you can calculate your monthly repayment. So they have this loan calculators also available on HDFC Credila, and you can check it out from there as well. Right, Union Bank is also offering similar kind of options for grad school students. And the important point that I want to cover here is that all these institutions are supporting some kind of universities. Okay, so Prodigy Finance, HDFC Credila, ICICI, all these banks and institutions are supporting some universities. So if your choice, university choice, falls under any of their supported or covered universities, then your rate of interest will drop. Okay, so because they have partnered with some of these universities, and that is why they give you a waiver on their rate of interest. So it reduces by around 0.5% to 1%. And the other things that can help you lower your interest rates are your academic background, your credit score, and your GRE scores in some cases. Like for example, for HDFC Credila, etc., we've observed that they are giving lesser rates of interest to students who have scored more in their GRE, or for students who have a very good academic background, a very good GPA. So they basically want to favor students with a good background and who are getting admitted into the universities that is covered under these institutions, right? So make sure whatever institution, whatever university you are choosing is covered under the bank that you are applying loan for. Okay, this is something that I wanted to cover. We are sharing the links in the chat right now. You can go to these banks, these institutions, and check it out. Okay, and then eligibility, like I said, a good academic background, a good credit score is important. And nowadays, banks also give loans without collateral. So previously, I would say 10, 15 years back, it was not possible to get a loan without a collateral. But now banks give collateral up to 70 lakhs. They are giving loans without a collateral. So that's a pretty, I think, decent amount. And most of the students would get covered under 70 lakhs. So it's a very, very good thing. And you can also check it out. This is the HDFC Credila link. You can go and check it out, right? And then I also want to make you aware of processing fees and other charges that you have to pay upfront when you're applying for a loan, right? So processing fee is generally 1% of the loan amount. And consider you're taking a loan of 50 lakh rupees. So 1% of that amounts to a substantial value. And this is the value that you have to pay upfront when you're applying for the loan, right? So you have to keep this amount ready with yourself. And I'm giving you this information because it shouldn't come as a sudden shock to you that I have to shell out this money at the very instant. Okay, so these processing fees and other charges are something that is not mentioned on the first page of these banks, but then keep this amount ready, because this is the processing fee. And then there are some other charges also. There are processing charges. Usually it is 1% of the loan amount. So I would say keep 1 to 1.5% of the loan amount liquid cash ready when you're applying for a loan, because this is the amount you'll have to shell upfront. Okay, and then when you take an educational loan, it is also important to remember that late payments are charged heavily, right? So banks like HDFC Credila have 2% interest per month for every overdue payment, EMI payment, right? So 24% for an entire year. Imagine what that would account to. Okay, so it is very important that you are not a defaulter when you start paying those EMIs. It is very important to take those EMIs seriously. Okay, because they have huge late payment charges. And then repayment options, every bank has a different repayment option, and usually, like we've seen, if you take a loan of 40 to 50 lakhs, it is generally when you graduate after an MS, you can repay it within 2 to 3 years of your job. So that is what usually happens. And some banks also have an option of starting to pay an interest every month at the time of your study. Okay, so this ensures that the student has a financial discipline when he or she graduates from college and actually starts paying his or her EMIs. So repayment options are up to you, and you can choose them as you want, right? And then we move to another important topic, that is how to select your fall versus spring cohort. Now, I would say that fall cohort begins in August and spring cohort begins in January. But fall cohort has a much larger size of applicants that they generally admit into every university. And this is the rule of thumb for every university, that their fall cohort is larger than the spring cohort. And sometimes it's also possible that some programs don't even have a spring cohort. So check out your program. If you're specifically very clear about applying to a spring cohort, it is important that you go and check on the website of the university if they have a spring cohort for that year, right? Because fall cohort is by default available, but that's not the case for spring cohort. Like I said, application deadline is December for fall, and for spring it is June or July. And another important reason of choosing the fall cohort is that it aligns with the summer internships. So it doesn't matter if you're doing PhDs or if you're doing MS, your fall cohort is going to align with the summer internship, and it is going to be your summer internship is going to fall in the perfect timeline of you pursuing the your MS or PhD graduate education. Okay, so if you're unsure of whether I should apply for fall or spring, then apply for fall. That is our suggestion, unless you have any specific preference and you have any specific reason to apply to spring cohort, you should go for fall cohort. Then we move to another important, very speculated topic, and a lot of students are curious about the scholarships that are available from India or in their country of choice, right? It is important and imperative that you know which scholarships are available for you to apply, so that you can reduce the money that you're shelling out, right? It is important for everybody. So first, I'm going to tell you about the scholarships that are available from India. So these are specifically for Indian citizens, and you can apply them while you are in India. You can also apply to them when you have gone abroad for your studies, right? So these scholarships are basically, the first category is a low to no interest scholarship. So it is not basically a scholarship; it is a zero interest loan. Okay, so a minimum or low interest loan, like I mentioned. So first is the Tata Endowment Scholarship. I've mentioned the link. We are sharing the link in the chat right now. This is a 2% interest scholarship, and that 2% also can be waived if the loan is repaid within 3 to 7 years. So generally, like I said, the loan is repaid within 3 years, and this can be converted into a no interest scholarship, right? So this scholarship gives you up to 10 lakh funding and travel grant. So they're giving you a loan of up to 10 lakh plus a travel grant also. So I think they're also sponsoring a one-way flight ticket for you. So like I said, if you forget to apply for this scholarship before you get admitted to some university, you can also apply during your or after your first year of your graduate study. So that is also possible. So check out this link. We will also be sharing all the links in the description of the YouTube video that we will be posting later. So it's okay if you just follow along with me right now, right? The next is the Narottam Seksaria Scholarship. So this is again an interest-free scholarship, interest-free loan, and they also provide up to 10 lakh funding. And this is again, they have a very rigorous process for selection. So they conduct interviews and they select candidates accordingly. And like I said, again, you can apply after your first year of graduate study if you have forgotten to do so before. Okay. The next is the actual scholarships, like the actual funding that you get from India. So this is the actual money that you get, and this is not an interest-free scholarship. This is actual money that you are going to get. Okay, you don't have to repay this money. So the first is the Inlak Shivdasani Foundation Scholarship. So this is available for either PhD or masters, applicable for USA and Europe both, and they can give you a very high funding up to $100,000. So generally all of our first year tuition is within this range, so it's a very good amount if you look at it. And they also, you know, have some specific programs before, so you have to just check if this particular scholarship is covering the program that you're applying to, right, before you actually apply to the scholarship. The link is again mentioned in the chat. And the next one is the National Overseas Scholarship. So this is basically a different kind of a scholarship for economically backward students based on caste. So for SC, ST, and other people having caste certificate, it is specially for low income groups of India. Okay, so you can get up to $15,000 funding for your graduate studies abroad, and it is imperative that you are below 35 years of age and your family income should be less than 8 lakh rupees. So this scholar for this scholarship also you will need to show your caste certificate, your money that you're earning per year, family earning, your age proof. So you will need a lot of documentation when you're applying for this scholarship. Again, I have mentioned the link here. The next is the KC Mahindra Education Trust Scholarship. So again, this is giving 10 lakh rupees for top 3 students and 5 lakh rupees for the rest of the students. And again, it is imperative that you get first class 60%, minimum 60% in your undergrad studies. Link I have mentioned. So, you know, check out all these scholarships and check out all the in everything in detail if your program is being covered by these scholarships. The next is the ADB scholarship. Now, this is funded by the Japanese government, and this does not include Europe. So if you're applying to universities in Europe, this scholarship is not for you. Again, it covers few universities in USA and Japan. This is basically, you know, funded by Japanese government. So this is like an Asian funding, Asian scholarship that they're providing, and this is hosted by Japan. Again, this requires you to have a work experience of 2 years, and on the condition that you are going to return to your home country after graduation. So this is like a conditional scholarship, and again I've mentioned the link here, but then make sure you are, you know, okay with all the conditions that are mentioned here. So it's kind of imperative that you return to your home country after your graduation for you to qualify in for this particular scholarship. Right. So the next is the Education Future International Scholarship. Again, they are giving you 2 to 10 lakh funding for both graduate and undergrad studies. So even if you're applying for undergrad, you can apply for this particular scholarship. It includes studies in both USA and Europe. 50% expense must be funded by an educational loan. So this is again a very important point that you have to consider. The first 50% you have to ensure that your loan is covering, and then they're going to give you this 2 to 10 lakh rupees funding, right? Again, it is imperative here that you get a minimum 60% first class throughout your education. The link I've mentioned here. The next is the USIEF scholarship. So this is basically for exclusively for US universities. Again, work experience of 3 years is mandatory when you're applying for the scholarship. A very important point I want to mention here, that they have a super early deadline, right? So most of the students fail to follow these deadlines. Super early deadline in May for next year fall cohort. So they have a super early, approximately 14 months early deadline, right? So most of the students will not be able to, you know, fit into this deadline. So it's very important to be proactive when you're applying for this particular scholarship. And you know, it only sponsors J1 visa. You can either do a master's or PhD when you're applying for this particular scholarship, and the link also I've mentioned here, right? So you can look at it, you can go through in detail. And another important point is all of these scholarships have their deadlines in February and March. Okay. So we are now at almost at the end of March, and I urge you to look at every scholar. If you are applying for your, if you're already got admits, or if you are applying next year, it is imperative that you do a thorough study before you apply to these scholarships. So except USIEF scholarship, for this year's fall cohort, the deadlines are February and March. Okay, so be very aware of these deadlines, and make sure that you apply to these scholarships before a particular deadline. Okay. So now, some of these scholarships in Europe, if you want to apply to a few scholarships in Europe, not the UK. So this is not for UK. This is for other countries in Europe, Schengen countries in Europe, basically. So the first is the EIT Digital Master School Scholarship. So the requirements are you need an undergrad transcript, your CV, SOP, travel allowance, and they give you travel allowance also, actually. And they have different funding options for different students, and the duration is 2 years to be. So if you are covered under this scholarship, they give you a full funding of 2 years, and you can choose the universities that are covered by EIT Digital Master School. So that is how it works. It also needs you to submit your TOEFL or IELTS course, and you can check more out on their website, right? And the next is the Erasmus scholarship. It also requires you to have your undergrad transcript, your CVs, two LORs also in addition to your SOPs. Duration can be 1 year or 2 years. You can also get a tuition waiver, a travel allowance, and a monthly stipend. So Erasmus scholarship also gives you a monthly stipend. You can check out more on their website. The link is mentioned below, right? So now, so now some of the scholarships in the US. So this is a particular list that of the scholarships that we have mentioned, that are available in the US. So these are mostly specific to the university, and there is a large list of options available. So make some of these are open, so you can, it doesn't matter which university you're applying to, but some of these are university oriented, like Stanford University scholarships or the University of Michigan scholarships. So these are university specific scholarships. Okay. And we are also going to mention this in the description of the YouTube video. I also want to show you some list of popular scholarships in the UK, right? So since we are talking about UK also, I want you to know that there is this Gates Cambridge scholarship in the UK that is available for international students in various fields of study, and application deadlines also we have mentioned here. So application deadlines are October to December. And like there's this Rhodes scholarship also, and for Germany there is DARD, and for there is Chevening scholarship for UK. So, and again, MSCA scholarship also is available for Europe if you want to go to Europe for pursuing your research. So this is again a lot about scholarships and everything that you need to know when you're applying for scholarships, depending on the country of choice. Okay. So now something about the current funding situation. I also want to add here that this particular funding situation I'm going to talk about is more related to the US, right? Because that is something that is very fickle right now, very volatile situation related to funding. So a lot of us know that the federal funding grants have been removed or put on hold for some of the universities, and that has led to again a lot of things like hiring freezes in the university, the research fundings being cut, PhD students not getting their funding and all of that. So the situation is still, I would say, a very volatile, and there is news, a lot of news, like University of Pennsylvania has slashed PhD admissions in the School of Medicine by 35%. Then there's this news from Columbia University that they have reduced funding in millions. So $400 million of research grants at Columbia are being reduced, right? Again, there's this news saying that the Johns Hopkins funding has been cancelled or removed, and it also is stated that It also stated that a lot of institutions and a lot of universities in the United States have been affected due to this current funding situation. Okay, but then again, this is regarding the current situation and what the current news is saying. Again, with that being said, I also want you to understand the current visa situation in the US. So since the visa scrutiny at it is at its peak, you have to be thoroughly prepared when you're appearing for your F1 visa interviews, when you are when you're applying or attending visa interviews for US universities. Okay, it is very important to follow the document checklist. Like, it is important to have those US consulate documents in place. It is important to have your admission, academic and financial documents in place. It is also important and imperative that you show a proof of finances from your bank account. So it is important that your bank statements show that you have 1.5 to 2 times the amount mentioned in your I-20 form. Okay, so it is important to follow this list very diligently and not to miss out on a single point when you're appearing for your visa interviews, because like I said, the situation is very volatile for international students going to the US right now, and we need to be thoroughly prepared for that, right? So this is something related to the visa process and the recent funding issues that have arisen in the United States. So now something about a realistic timeline of how we should go about preparing ourselves, right? So we've talked about the country of choice, we've talked about funding, we've talked about a lot of scholarships, we've talked about masters, PhD, and fall and spring cohorts, everything. So now you have all the information on your hands to proceed on how you're going to shortlist your universities. So now is the time when you should shortlist your universities and plan a realistic timeline for your application. So considering you're applying for fall cohort of 2026, I just want to show you a very realistic timeline. So we are in the month of March, and we would want to start you making your or start building your research profile in the next few months. So university shortlisting I've mentioned in May, but then again, it's never too late to start. And today is also a very good day to start your university shortlisting, right? So you need to follow the pointers that I mentioned about making decisions about every aspect in your application process. And first and foremost thing, side by side, start building your research profile, because that is something we always urge the students to do, and it takes minimum of 3 or 4 months for you to do that, right? So it is very important and very imperative you do that. Then your document preparation is going to take I would say around a month or two, and it is very important that you have your documents like SOPs, LORs and resume in place, and it is important that it is coherent. Okay, so document preparation, I would say you can start doing from August, and from November, you can start researching on scholarships and applications. So all the scholarships that I mentioned right now, you can look at them maybe later if you're applying for fall cohort of next year. And if we have also a few participants who are going to go abroad for their graduate studies next year, then March is the deadline for that, and you should maybe quickly apply to these scholarships, right? And then most of the times December is the application deadline for the fall cohort. So that is when your application should be ready, and you should be completely and thoroughly prepared with your entire things that are required for your application for submission. Okay, so you shouldn't panic at the last moment, and that is why I want to tell you how important it is to plan a realistic timeline so that you don't panic at the last moment, right? Now, a little bit about Videsh long-term membership and how we are here to help you. So, 2024 results, we have 17 research papers in draft stage. We help students build their research profiles. We also have, submissions to international conferences. So recently we got news that a lot of papers have been, accepted by this very famous lab, and a lot of students will have the chance to go to the US and present their papers there. So that is another feather in the cap for Videsh. Then again, 11th research internship started. We have started research internships also, and we also help students with that. We also help students with projects. Okay, so projects in your particular field of domain, we also help you with that. And then connections with international professors, PhD and master students. So we also help you connect with the university professors that you are interested in. So we tell you how to interact with them before even getting an admit, so that it creates a positive impact on your application. So that is also something that we guide you with. And then what happens is that our mentorship will improve your application by 5 times. So it is going, because Raj, Rajat and Sridhar did not have any professional guidance at the time they were doing their applications. And that is Videsh's aim. That is their aim, to help students and working professionals like yourself to improve your application and make a strong profile, right? And we want to help you in a way to achieve that. Okay. And then some results from UI, UC, Princeton, University of Maryland, Cleveland University. So we have started, getting results for this year 2025, cohort. And a lot of people have been admitted into a lot of top universities. So these are, of course, some universities that we have mentioned. There are a lot of more universities that our students have been admitted to. So it is a very proud moment for us. Like I said, we have 2 phases in our long-term mentorship program. So the first phase is the build your research profile. So this takes about 3 or 4 months, and we help you identify research topics, and we help you to write abstracts. We help you to write how to write a research paper, and we also help you review that. So our founders are directly involved in this stage of your of building your profile. So this is how they help you build your research profile, and that is a very crucial aspect of your application. The next stage is phase 2 of the LTM, is perfecting your application. So making your documents very clean and very stellar and out of this world is the second part of the LTM, and that includes your SOP, resume, LOR, and university shortlisting as well. So this is something related to the document part of the LTM that we also help you with. And what we are doing, right, building your research profile, is we are going to help you to identify good and easy problem statements. We help you to teach, we help you to write the research papers, and also we help you with a very realistic timeline. Okay, so the timeline that I just mentioned is a very I would say generic timeline, and what we are doing is we are giving you a very detailed breakup of the timeline week by week. And that is how we want to help our students build a very realistic and very managed timeline, so that they are not losing out on any particular week. And then we help you figure out how to submit your research work, how to submit your papers to different journals, different conferences, etc. So we help you with all of this. And then if you are interested in the LTM program, again, if you have any questions related to the document shortlisting or any of the other points, you can send an email to hello@flyvidesh.com with as many details as possible, and we are here to help you. So mention your name, details of work study, when you're planning to apply for grad school, and why you are interested in LTM. And also please attach a latest version of your resume when you're sending in your queries. Okay, so don't just send one liners to us, and make sure to include as many details as possible, so it will help us to know your profile a lot better, and it will help us to guide you a bit more. Okay, so help us with that, and send out a mail to us if you're interested. Again, thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and if I think there are 5 minutes left, and we have Dr. Raj also on the call, and if he would like to take a couple of more questions, he can do that. So Raj, over to you.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Radhika, for the wonderful presentation. Uh, there are some questions in the chat which I would like to address. The first question is about research profile. And there are several questions about what constitutes a good research profile essentially. And why is research profile so important? Is it even important for a master's or a PhD? So, in my experience, one way to truly distinguish yourself from the rest of the applicants is to build a strong research profile. And what that means is not just publishing a huge number of papers, 8 papers or 10 papers in journals which no one knows about. But if you just have one paper in a impactful journal or a conference in which you are the first author, that goes a long way in convincing the admissions committee that you have the capability to be a graduate school student and contribute to the research output of the university. For example, when I applied for grad school, I applied to 10 universities and I got into 8 of those, including MIT and Stanford. And what distinguished me from others was not really my GPA, because I was the 10th in my class. There were 9 other students above me who were applying to the same universities. But the reason I got into MIT is because of my research profile. I had one strong journal publication in the Journal of Fluid Mechanics, which is a very good journal. And I had only one publication, but I was the first author on it. And I started working on this paper from my second year of undergrad. So, to everyone in this call right now who is in college right now, who might be in the first, second, or third year, and if you have not started working on research, or if you are in a job right now, whichever stage you are in, just try to approach a professor and work on a research problem. Doing research is hard, but it pays off. Uh, it pays huge dividends later. It's one of the most valuable things which you can do actually. And I realized that much later. No one told it to me before, but I accidentally started doing research. But one advice which I would like to give you in this webinar is that research is that thing which helps the most in grad school applications. And now is March, right? If you're applying for fall 2026, you still have about 5 to 6 months to develop your research. If you're applying next year, that's even great, because then you have 2 more years. So don't neglect research. Let's see some other questions in the chat. There is a question about having a conference paper in ICTIS Thailand. So I have not heard about this conference, honestly. One way to check how good a conference or a journal is to check the impact factor. If the impact factor is greater than 3, it's a good journal. There is a question on how do you approach a professor. So what I did is that I just went to the professor, and at that time I had no experience in research. I just knocked on his door and entered his office and asked him that, are you working on any research project? Then he asked me, what's the experience which you have with research? I told him that I have zero experience and I just want to learn. So what he did was he assigned me on a project, and I was mentored by a PhD student in his group. And that's how my research journey actually started. And it took me around 2.5 years later to start working on my own research problem. But professors are usually very open to give research projects to students, even if you have no publications before. And if you're out of an academic environment, let's say, you can email professors. If you can email professors asking them that, hey, I want to start a research project under your guidance, will it be possible to do that? I'm willing to work for free. That goes a long way, because then if the professor knows that they don't have to pay you and you have a good resume, then it's a good offer for them, right? Then you can start working with them on the research project. There is a question about got I got an offer letter from University of York, UK, and it's Russell Group's University to QS ranking of 184. So I cannot answer like this because I need much more information, Mayank, about your profile. Uh, Basically, what are your ambitions? What are your goals? Then in this university, are there any good research groups? One way to evaluate a university is not just from the impact factor, but you should go to the research websites of all the professors, see where they are publishing research, because ultimately you will work with some of them. And how well you do in grad school depends on the quality of the research which you do with these professors. So QS rankings is a very poor metric for deciding whether to go to a university or not. All right, everyone, it's almost 8 p.m. now. I want to thank Radhika for this wonderful presentation. And yeah, Radhika, if you want to share something else.
No, thank you everybody for attending this session. Thank you, Raj. And I just want to wish everybody all the best. And if you have any questions, let us know and we'll be happy to get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.